Hello once again YouTube, Chris the Nightbringer here bringing you some World Painter action. Obviously I'm not in World Painter at the moment, I just wanted to do a quick render of the map so that you could see where I am and how the terrain is coming along so far. If you don't remember, we are working on Pyke, which is this island right here, the place that this castle will be built on, and right now I'm at a place called Lordsport. This is the location we'll be building the port on the island. In the World Painter series. So I just wanted to show you just how the terrain is so far by what we have on the map, and I'll go back to the World Painter program and map in a few seconds, but just so you understand what we have to achieve with the map, it's better to actually sometimes load the program or load the map into Minecraft multiple times, sections of the map, so that you could see the effects of what you're doing, because it's hard to get an idea when you're in World Painter what exactly you're doing. So if you remember, we have all these sort of randomly generated terrain, because we kind of just went over with the raise tool and raised the island out of the water instead of actually like planning out where hills and stuff were going to go. And we did this kind of haphazardly, and it's given us a variety of terrain. It's a little bit higher on the edges, and I feel as if we go inland, it will be a little bit lower. As you can see, there's some decent looking hills. They're not too bad, and I actually kind of like how those look. But we need to add cliffs to this coast, because this is supposed to be an incredibly stony island. And as you can see from this image and some of the other images of the locations where they filmed the island of Pyke, you could see that there's watery cliffs, coastal cliffs all over this place, and it's kind of difficult, because here you can see that the cliffs are kind of a normal grayish stone, maybe a little bit darker down here, and in an image like this one or this one, you could see that the cliffs are actually really white, and I'm having difficulty figuring out whether I want the cliffs to be the dark stone from the Conquest texture pack or a light stone from the Conquest texture pack, and maybe you guys can help me out with that. Depends if I post the video early enough before I start painting the terrain. But yeah, so it's good to check the terrain that you're creating multiple times before you actually export it, because if you're working on a big map and you lose track of things, you can actually end up with big problems post-production of your map, post-exportation, and it'll be a significant hit to like your time spent, and whether it was a waste or not. If you check under the water, you could see that the harbor area is a little bit more raised, and it slowly slopes down into the ocean and seabed, and it continues to slope for quite a bit. As you can see all the way over here, it's still sloping down, and that's pretty good. We wanted that to happen. Over here is the edge of the map that I exported. It goes on for quite a while, and it could actually sink even lower. Let me get down here and find out. Yeah, it sinks a little bit lower in some places, not so much in other places. So yeah, that's definitely, pretty good the way we handled the seafloor and stuff, and it actually makes it look really nice, especially if you can actually see the underwater pieces of land. So I'm going to jump back into World Painter, and we're going to continue with building the coastline, and we'll see how that's made and how I go about making cliffs and stuff. Alright, so we're back in World Painter, and as you can see, this area right here is about the size of the area that I exported into Minecraft. As you can see, it's got the entire harbor bay shape going on right there. It shouldn't be too big, because you actually don't notice that on the maps that you see of Pyke, but that's where Lordsport is going to be, over there by the bay. As you may remember, down here is Pyke, the castle. This will probably be the highest area of the terrain. And up here we have another place called Ironholt, which, as I understand it, may be the only place with either trees or a mine on this island. I could be wrong, and there certainly are probably more mines on these islands. But that's the main three places that we will be building after this entire map is done. But what we need to do is we need to make these coastal areas have quite a decent number of cliffs. Like I said, there's no safe harbor at this island, save for Lordsport, and that's only because the terrain around it is a little bit nicer for a harbor to be established in the first place. Of course, you can have docks and little fishing villages, but there's no place to put big ships other than that island. So over here we have, the contour lines show. Oh my God, I just zoomed into like the fucking face of that dirt. Like I just planted right there. My bad. Right here we could see the contour lines, and if you remember, we set these to be apart at 10 blocks each. So every 10 blocks you'll see another contour line, and it tells you how high and low the terrain is, along with the shadowed and highlighted edges of the actual blocks themselves, which you can see all over the place. What we want to do is we want relatively low cliffs, not too crazy. It doesn't have to be crazy. It doesn't have to be something like the cliffs of Dover, but we want things like this all around the island. We want these cliffs to extend up into the island a little bit. They can go higher, they can go lower, but we want this type of cliffy terrain on the edge. And behind those cliffs, we want relatively smooth grass. The only issue is that this place is supposed to be very rocky, so those rocks might actually turn out, or that grass might actually turn out to be rocky in the end when we go back and look over this and see if we liked what we got, because I'll probably be exporting a section of this map afterwards and showing you how that turned out. So we want to make sure that, there's relatively decent amount of grass, but the grass is just that, it's grass. There's not really much soil beneath it. It doesn't have to be thick, so we can find, a way to make it look as if it's still not very good land for farming and stuff, and we could probably do that by throwing in some jagged rocks every now and then, or jagged terrain. So coming back to this, I'm going to grab the flatten tool, which is over here. This will allow us to flatten sections of land at once. As you can see, if I just hold it, it will make everything flatten to the shape of my brush. And if we look at the 3D view and scroll on down, you can see that there's now a flattened piece of terrain with a very sharp edge. Not perfectly sharp. At the top it rounds out a little bit, and that's just because the brush is smoother on the edges than it is in the center. If you would like to use my brushes, they'll be available for download in the description, and you can download all the brushes that I'm using. I'm going to be using this one. I don't know if it's going to be called the same thing when you download them. It should be. It's called Cliff 5. This is just a brush that I use to make these types of jagged cliffs and mountains as well. So we're going to come up here around this contour line, which is up here, and just drag this out. And we don't have to be perfect with this. We want to just get like an idea of where these cliff edges are going to go. Don't have to be, the same height either. If we want, we can extend this hill so that it comes out and meets the ocean as well, and that'll be about 20 blocks high or so. And as you can see, that's a bit decent cliff right there. And don't worry about the fact that we were flattening these areas out behind it, because we'll go over that in a separate moment, a separate time, and make all this terrain look a little bit more natural. But right now we just want to add these cliffs to the edge, and I'll show you how you can do that in multiple ways. Now obviously you can use the flatten tool like I just have. Another technique, which is kind of something you have to feel around with, is actually now that I realize that the brush setting's at 0% or 50%, so let me turn that up to 100%, and I'll show you that one more time, just so you get an idea of how far out these cliffs come and how quickly you can make some decent cliffs. They're not amazing cliffs, I'll be honest, they're not perfect yet, but you can see just how quickly we can come in here and make some really crazy looking edges to this terrain. And if you look here, you can see that that's forming a pretty decent looking cliff right there, and a smaller one is there beneath it. Another decent and pretty good way of making cliffs is actually doing the opposite, and that's digging into the terrain. So if we take this this brush here maybe, and we actually do the same thing with the flatten tool, except we dig into the cliff that we just made, it'll help define that edge a little bit more and make it a little bit more steep. When we come back over here, you'll see that it has shrunk this back, but it has also made it a lot steeper. That's a pretty good and useful tool if you want to get back into a cliff and make it steeper, but the only downside is it just flattened this entire coastal area, and what you want to do after that is you want to take one of these brushes again, preferably a jagged one, not one of these up here, not one of the regular World Painter brushes, but a custom brush, and you just want to go over the terrain once more and make it a little bit rough. And like I said, these areas are going to be very rough. The cliff brushes that I have included, these three right here, the Cliff 6, Cliff 5, and Cliff 7 that I use, are very jagged brushes, and when you hold them down, they create very jagged pieces of terrain, as you can see right there. Those black lines and all those sharp edges on that terrain shows you just how sharp and rough it is. So I'm going to get rid of that, but as you can see, this coastal area is looking a little bit more, you know, dangerous now, and it's not so smooth, and it's possibly turning into something pretty good. So we're going to go around the entire island and add these cliffs, and once we're done with that, for some reason I can't move. There we go. Once we're done with that, I'm going to come back into Minecraft and show you the effects of what I have just done, and you'll be able to see just how decent of a coastal cliffside we can make. Don't be afraid to make massive areas of land jutting out like this. It's good. It'll help make your terrain look nice, especially when we come in and paint it. Don't forget though to leave some areas for beaches, especially where it gets low, where you've already got randomized terrain making this area low. For example, over here, we don't have to put cliffs on this edge. We can have cliffs going around this place and down here and stuff. Another thing that you can use to make cliffs look a little bit more natural is to actually shrink down the size of your brush so it's very small. It only covers about the edge of the water to the very highest point of your cliff, or wherever the edge of your cliff is on the lowest point, and you just click. And what that'll do is it'll give it a more natural, eroded looking shape. This is very good for canyons, and in the future I might be able to show you a better video explaining this, but it'll cut away some of the top layers of your cliff, and it'll make it seem as if those areas have eroded down, kind of like a Grand Canyon effect, where there's like a tier of where it gets thicker in the canyon walls. Near the bottom of the canyon itself, or the cliff itself. So it gives a nice impression of erosion just by using your cliff button again when you do that. Of course, this works a lot better with bigger cliffs and canyons, but it still gives the same effect, and you actually do see this in game. It's quite astonishing how much of the effect you see in game. Even from here, you can't really tell what the heck I just did, but it actually turns out pretty decent in game, and I'll show you that in Minecraft too when I export them. I actually forgot to mention, instead of just dragging this and pulling into a cliff, if you want, you can actually just tap real quick. It'll give you an amazing effect with minimal effort. If we come over here and we just look at this side of the map that I just created, all the way over here, you'll see some crazy cliffs, and it actually looks pretty great. We just gotta wait for this to all load in. And I do apologize if my voice is going a little bit freakishly crazy right now, but I'll show you the cliffs over here. If you can see those edges, they actually look really good, and I'll show you those in game. When we paint that terrain, those cliffs are going to be pure stone. There's not going to be any grass on them because of how steep it is, and it's going to look amazing. I'm going to raise that terrain a little bit, but I just wanted to show you that you can actually just throw in like 10 cliffs all stacked and next to each other with minimal effort just by tapping with a cliff brush that I'm going to be supplying you, or any custom brush that you make on your own. Like I grabbed this small cliff 1 down here, right? And I just tap, right? Especially with it into the ocean. Bam! Right there. You can see all those hard edges. The brighter that line is, or the darker that line is, the more steep it is. And it's just showing you just how insanely good you can get some terrain with just a minimal effort. And it's really good if you just come over here and do the same thing on this side. With minimal effort, you can create some really nice rocky, just fucked up landscape that nobody wants to try and climb and stuff. I think it just looks great, so I'm going to continue using that. I completely forgot about that technique, but there you go. Have it, eat it, consume that shit, and I'll see you on the map when I'm done with this terrain. Alright, now I have exported the map, or a section of the map, into Minecraft. I will overlay an image of where I actually am on the map so that you can see what the terrain looks like from World Painter and how it translates into Minecraft when you export the map. This is very close to what we're looking for. I'm going to end the episode soon because these are supposed to be short episodes, but you can see how quickly we made very sharp cliffs using the techniques I showed. Of course, these cliffs and their, the way they... Oh my god, I just went through, like, the fucking mouth of that squid. Um, the cliffs extend into the water, and that's basically, either a drawback of this technique or an additional, like, technique of this technique. I don't know how to word it, but either it's a benefit or not to you. But I think these cliffs are pretty close to what we want. In the future, like I said, we aren't done with this area, and I'll be going over some of this land because this is actually close to one of the castles, I believe. Let me just continue to fly around here while I get a scope of this place. But in the future episodes, we will be expanding on the terrain on the inside of the island instead of just the coastal areas. We'll be adding details like rocks and stuff to the coastal areas. Here's a decent looking beach, but I have a feeling I'm going to be raising this because this doesn't look tall enough. I don't remember where this beach is, but I feel like there should be a taller area here. I think I went north. Yes, I did. So this is the peak of this the island here, and I think right here we're starting to see some taller cliffs, more broad cliffs. They're not broken up into smaller segments. There's just a flat up cliff against the coastal area. Now here is supposed to be the location of a tower. It's called Iron Holt on this island. You don't actually see it in Game of Thrones, the show, and it's not really described in the books either, from what I can understand. So that leaves it entirely up to my interpretation now. I believe it's just a single tower with a town built around it, and the tower is most likely the Lord's home. So I think I'm going to put this as like a tower on the edge of this coastal landscape, these coastal cliffs here, and we'll make a nice town on the edges of these cliffs, and maybe a small stairway or a way down to the cliffs at the bottom with a boat or two, because they really wouldn't have docks located on cliffs these tall. What we're going to do in the future episodes, like I said, is we're going to raise the terrain on the inside of the island. Right now, the highest parts of the terrain are actually the coasts because of the way we did our cliffs. We raised the terrain around the coasts using the flatten tool so that the terrain on the edges of the water was really tall, like it is here. It's about 30-ish blocks taller than the water is in some places, and we need the in middle parts of the island to be taller. We need them to seem more mountainous than they are, and we have plenty of room to do that. I'm only on let's see, I'm only on Y83. The tallest these cliffs get in this area is Y90. So that's a 30-foot drop in a cliff at the most. So what we're going to do is we're going to raise the land on the inside of these coastal areas and basically make it more rocky and mountainous on the inside. Some places will have it a little bit smoother, but in general, you're going to be seeing these types of cliffs everywhere. And the purpose of that is because as I'm sticking to the books and the show as accurately as I can. And this island is supposed to be very bad for farming. It's supposed to be having rocky soil, and it's not really got much, viable farm space that's really gonna let you grow any crops or anything. And I believe the best way of conveying that is just make this place rocky as fuck, and not exactly the coolest looking place for like farms and shit. Maybe mines. I might do some mines, but from what I understand, that is like the one import of these islands, or the one export, major export, was the iron mines, which is why they're called the Iron Islands, I suppose. Makes sense. So anyway, These are the coastal cliffs. In the future, we will be painting these. They will look a lot better when they're painted. And of course, we're still sticking with dirt because we don't want any, other types of terrain or materials getting in here until we're ready to get painted with this terrain. So I do apologize if they don't seem perfect to you. And like I said, they're not finished yet. When we start adding up the layers of the terrain on the inside, these cliffs are going to get a little bit smoothed out on the top. And that's a pretty good thing because these sharp edged cliffs that go straight down aren't exactly good. We don't want those. We want cliffs that are a little bit more rough and not so straight cut. In some places that's okay, some places that's not, but only if the cliff is short enough. When it's tall enough that you can see the rock underneath the cliff, the rock underneath the dirt, that's not good, and that's something we're going to try and avoid. Of course, painting will help this process and help clean that up and make it look a lot better, but right now we don't want that. So that's all for this episode. In the next episode, we'll be going over mountainous terrain and the inside of this land, of the actual mainland of this island, and we'll be adding some details to the coast, like rocks and stuff, and quick tips for touching up this terrain. I don't think I'll be continuing much with the terrain making any longer. After that, it's going to go on to biome painting and tree placing, and that's pretty much it. And then we're going to start the build of the castles and the towns. So thanks for watching. Comment, rate, favorite, subscribe. Tell me what you think of this stuff so far. I think the fucking music is playing, so let me turn that down so that you can hear my legit as fuck music that I put at the end of my videos. And I'll see you guys next time. There are hills and stuff we're gonna go, and we did this kind of haphazardly, and it's given us a variety of terrain. It's a little bit higher on the edges, and I feel as if as we go inland, it will be a little bit lower. And as you can see, there's some decent looking hills. They're not too bad, and I actually kind of like how those look. But we need to add cliffs to this coast because this is supposed to be an incredibly stony island, and as you can see from this image and some of the other images of the locations where they filmed the island of Pyke, you could see that there's watery cliffs, coastal cliffs all over this place. And hello once again, YouTube. Chris the Nightbringer here, bringing you some World Painter action. Obviously, I'm not in World Painter at the moment. I just wanted to do a quick render of the map so that you could see where I am and how the terrain is coming along so far. If you don't remember, we are working on Pyke, which is this island right here, the place that this castle will be built on, and right now I'm at a place called Lordsport. This is the location we'll be building the port on the island. In the World Painter series. So I just wanted to show you just how the terrain, it's kind of difficult because here you can see that the cliffs are kind of a normal grayish stone, maybe a little bit darker down here, and in an image like this one or this one, you could see that the cliffs are actually really white, and I'm having difficulty figuring out whether I want the cliffs to be the dark stone from the Conquest texture pack or a light stone from the Conquest texture pack, and maybe you guys can help me out with that. Depends if I post the video early enough before I start painting the terrain. But yeah, so it's good to check the terrain that you're creating multiple times before you actually export it, because if you're working on a big map and you lose track of things, you can actually end up with big problems post-production so far by what we have on the map. And I'll go back to the World Painter program and map in a few seconds, but just so you understand what we have to achieve with the map, it's better to actually sometimes load the program or load the map into Minecraft multiple times, sections of the map, so that you could see the effects of what you're doing, because it's hard to get an idea when you're in World Painter what exactly you're doing. So if you remember, we have all these sort of randomly generated terrain because we kind of just went over with the raise tool and raised the island out of the water instead of actually like planning out of your map post exportation, and it'll be a significant you know, hit to like your time spent, and you know, whether it was a waste or not. If you check under the water, you could see that the harbor area is a little bit more raised, and it slowly slopes down into the ocean and seabed, and it continues to slope for quite a bit. As you can see all the way over here, it's still sloping down, and that's pretty good. We wanted that to happen. Over here is the edge of the map that I exported. It goes on for quite a while, and it could actually sink even lower. Let me get down here and find out. Yeah, it sinks a little bit lower in some places.